I used to think the most painful betrayals were loud. Fights, confessions, tears. I didn't expect mine to come wrapped in kindness. My wife and I had been together for 14 years, married for 10. We were predictable in the best way. Same routines, same friends, same future plans. People joked that we were already an old married couple, and I took that as proof that we were solid. The first thing that changed wasn't her behavior toward me. It was how careful she became. Every sentence felt measured. Every reaction seemed intentional. If I asked how her day was, she'd give me just enough detail to sound present, then redirect the conversation back to something neutral. When I asked if something was wrong, she smiled and said, "Nothing's wrong. I'm just trying to be more mindful." That word, mindful, made me drop the subject. Soon after, she started doing small things that felt generous on the surface. Surprise dinners, compliments, random texts telling me she appreciated me. It felt good, but also strange, like she was paying me in advance for something I didn't understand yet. Then came the conversations. She said she'd been reflecting on who she was becoming, that she wanted to grow, that sometimes people outgrow versions of themselves and of each other without meaning to hurt anyone. I listened. I tried to be supportive. I didn't hear a warning. I heard vulnerability. One night, she said something that stuck with me. "I don't want to lie to you," she said quietly, "even if the truth is uncomfortable." I asked what she meant. She hesitated just long enough to feel deliberate, then said, "I've been leaning on someone else emotionally." She assured me nothing physical had happened, that she caught it early, that telling me now was proof she respected me. I felt hurt, but also oddly relieved. At least there was honesty. At least we were facing it together. She reached for my hand and said, "I need you to trust that I'm trying to do the right thing." I squeezed her hand back and said I did. That was the moment everything quietly shifted. Because looking back now, I realized I wasn't being invited into the truth. I was being prepared for it. After that night, honesty became her favorite word. She used it like a shield. Every uncomfortable update came wrapped in the same phrase. "I don't want there to be secrets." If I flinched, she'd remind me that she was choosing transparency, and that should count for something. She started mentioning him more often, not just as someone, but as a presence in her day, how he understood her stress, how easy it was to talk to him, how he never judged. Each comment felt small on its own, but together they began to take up space that used to belong to us. When I asked what the line was, she looked surprised. "Why do we need lines?" she said. "Isn't trust about flexibility?" I told her flexibility still needs consent. She nodded, but nothing changed. She asked if she could meet him for coffee. Just once. Then it became a regular thing. When I said it made me uncomfortable, she said I was catastrophizing, that she was being careful for my sake, that I should appreciate how much she was trying to include me. Inclusion, I learned, can be another form of erasure. One evening she came home glowing, energized in a way I hadn't seen in years. She talked about how alive she felt, how refreshing it was to be seen without expectations. I asked if anything physical had happened. She shook her head. "But even if it did," she added gently, "I'd tell you, that's the kind of relationship I want us to have." That answer didn't comfort me. It frightened me, because it wasn't reassurance, it was a test. Over the next weeks, the rules kept shifting. What was once just emotional became a harmless kiss. What was never going to cross that line turned into, "I can't control feelings." Every boundary I tried to set was reframed as insecurity, fear, or a lack of growth. One night, exhausted, I asked her a simple question. "If I said I couldn't do this anymore, what would you do?" She didn't answer right away. When she finally spoke, she said, "I don't think it's fair to make me choose." That's when I realized something that made my stomach drop. I wasn't part of the decision anymore. I was just being informed about it. After that, I started paying attention to how often her kindness came with conditions. She'd check in on me after seeing him, ask how I was feeling, listen patiently, and then do exactly what she'd already planned to do. The concern felt rehearsed, like a courtesy step she needed to complete before moving on. If I showed pain, she'd soften her voice and say she was sorry I felt that way. If I stayed calm, she'd take it as proof I was handling it well. Either response worked in her favor. She began framing everything as growth, told me I was brave for staying open, that not everyone could handle this kind of honesty, compliments that sounded supportive but quietly boxed me into a role I hadn't chosen. One night, she said, "I hope you know how much I appreciate you not making this harder than it already is." That sentence stopped me cold, because suddenly, my pain wasn't something to address. It was an obstacle she was grateful I wasn't putting in her way. I realized then how carefully the dynamic had been built. She moved forward. I processed. She decided. I adapted. At no point was I actually asked what I wanted, only whether I could live with what she'd already chosen. The moment that broke something in me was small. She told me she wouldn't be coming home that night. Said it gently, apologetically, like someone canceling dinner plans. I asked where she'd be staying. "With him," she said. "I think it's time." Time for what? She didn't say. After the call ended, I sat alone in the quiet apartment and felt something shift. Not anger, not panic, clarity. I finally understood that I wasn't being included in an honest process. I was being eased out, slowly enough that I wouldn't resist. And once I saw that clearly, the question stopped being whether I could handle this. It became whether I was willing to disappear quietly to make it easier for her. Something changed after that night. I stopped trying to be understanding, not out of spite, but out of exhaustion. I realized I'd been carrying the emotional weight of two people while she carried none of the consequences. The next time she checked in on me with that careful, gentle tone, I didn't reassure her. I didn't say I was okay. I said, "I'm not." She looked surprised, then uncomfortable. I told her plainly that this situation was hurting me, that honesty without consent wasn't respect, that being informed about decisions after they were already made didn't make me a partner. It made me an audience. She listened quietly, then said, "I don't know what you want me to do." That answer told me everything. Because if stopping had been an option, she would have offered it. Instead, she framed the situation like a natural disaster, unfortunate but inevitable. I stopped debating philosophy after that. I stopped talking about growth and openness and emotional maturity. I focused on practical reality. I checked our finances. I gathered documents. I spoke to a lawyer once, quietly, just to understand what protecting myself actually meant. For the first time in months, I felt grounded. When she noticed a shift, she accused me of shutting down, of being cold, of giving up too easily. She said she didn't recognize me anymore. I told her calmly, I finally recognized myself. She didn't respond. And in that silence, I knew the dynamic had broken. Not because she suddenly cared, but because I was no longer playing a role that made this easy for her. For the first time, I wasn't asking how to survive her choices. I was deciding whether I want to stay in a life where my pain was treated as an inconvenience. After that, everything became quieter. She stopped trying to persuade me, stopped explaining. Instead, she acted like the outcome was already settled, like we were just waiting for me to catch up emotionally. She talked about timelines, about needing space to honor her truth, about how endings don't have to be dramatic to be healthy. I listened, and for the first time, I didn't feel pulled into the conversation. What stood out wasn't what she said, but what she never asked. She didn't ask if I was okay with any of this. She didn't ask what it was doing to me. The kindness she kept offering had a clear boundary. It ended exactly where my pain began. I made my decision without announcing it. I separated finances, packed what mattered, lined things up quietly so I wouldn't have to negotiate my way out later. When I finally told her I was leaving, there was no speech and no anger in my voice. I said, I don't want to be in a relationship where my pain is treated like a side effect. She looked shocked, not heartbroken, shocked, like she truly believed I would keep adapting, keep understanding, keep shrinking to make the transition smoother for her. The weeks after were harder than I expected, but also clearer. I stopped replaying conversations, stopped wondering if I'd misunderstood something, stopped asking myself whether I was being unfair or immature or afraid. What I learned is this: kindness can still be selfish. Honesty can still be harmful. And growth that only moves in one direction isn't growth. It's replacement. If someone asks you to accept pain as proof of maturity, pay attention. Being calm doesn't mean staying. Being understanding doesn't mean disappearing. Walking away didn't make me closed-minded. It made me present again in my own life with my own voice finally intact.